pleasure to be able to interact with you on a subject which I'm sure is close to your heart. And I would begin with my first question. What are your views on the current engineering education system? And where do you think India is poised towards a change to meet those challenges?
Well, as far as Indian engineering is concerned, I do believe it has done us proud. You can cite examples right from Tata Nano at one hand, on the other hand the KGD-6, where our engineers were able to do something that has not been done before, going 2 kilometers below the surface of the sea and moving from discovery to production from within 6.5 years, as against the world average of 11 years, or the Jamnagar refinery, for example, our advances in space technology, atomic energy, defense. I mean, you will find that our engineers have done remarkably well in terms of delivering the national objectives through several endeavors, right from production to manufacturing to research and development and to software development and so on. The current challenge, however, is that we produce lots of engineers, but how good are they? That becomes a question. For example, we are supposed to be producing close to 300,000 engineers per year, but when it comes to their quality, there is a big question mark. And therefore, is the quality not just the quantity that matters? How do we tighten that is one issue. The second is the world is changing, and so has India to change. And for that change, and by that change I mean several new problems that we come across, whether they are connected with natural disasters, they are connected with climate change, they are connected with a growing population with less resources and therefore getting more from less. How do engineers tune themselves to these challenges and deliver in the field? I believe these are some of the important challenges.
And so if you look at the existing curriculum and in the broad spectrum, do you think it needs a change in addressing those issues and challenges that you are foreseeing?
I believe both the curriculum as well as the pedagogy, both of them need a drastic change. First, the curriculum, because knowledge is doubling up every 5 to 10 years.
That's right.
And you can't continue with the curricula which you used 10 years ago, for example. They have to undergo a continuous change. The second is the pedagogy, because education is all about learning to learn. Education is all about knowing, doing, and being. What do I mean by knowing? Knowing means the teacher disseminates the knowledge that is known, the student absorbs it, and learns to use that knowledge, let us say. Doing means doing with your own hands. It is learning by doing all the time. Otherwise, you will just remain theoretical, you will remain bookish. That's not what engineers are expected to do. Engineers are supposed to deliver in the field. You know, a theoretical physicist can lock himself up in the lab and sit in front of the computer and rule the world, but not an engineer. Engineer has to deliver in the field. And finally, being, because whether you are a scientist or an engineer or an economist, etc., finally you are a part of a society. And therefore, how do you become a valuable part of the society? How do you create not only value for yourself, but you add a value to the society in which you are? So all these three aspects are extremely important. And I believe with the kind of numbers that we are talking about, and with the kind of distances we are talking about, let's not forget, we talk about engineering colleges in the urban area, but there are engineering colleges in the rural areas. There are people who are far, far away from the mainstream of activities. How do we deliver education to them? I think these are the critical points.
And you touched upon a point, you talked about real-time problem solving, you talked about project-based learning. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, it is extremely important that right from childhood we develop this particular habit of doing and learning from that, basically. Now, what it does is that it automatically makes you a part of a solution, not part of a problem. Because if you have to deliver a project, that means you have to provide a solution. You can't end up by making a statement of 10 problems that remain unsolved. You have to make a statement about one problem that you solved. That means solution engineering, if I may put it this way, is the core of all the engineering that we do. Now, while we do that, we do conceptualization, then we do design of a prototype, we think in terms of scaling it, we think in terms of adapting it to the conditions in which it will finally be used. We start looking at sustainability because that is a big issue today, but equally importantly, particularly for a country like India, you start looking at making things that are available, affordable and accessible. Because India's major challenge is access. It is not the income inequality. That is important, but access inequality is even more important. Even when you have an income, you may not get an access. And by that I mean access to education, access to health, access to knowledge, access to transport, access to communications, I mean the whole range of things. Okay. Now how do you provide that access is something that an engineer has to think of, basically, you know. That means reaching what is unreached or unreachable. So engineer needs to develop this habit of making impossible possible. In fact, there is a IEEE medal called Lemme Medal, and there is an inscription on that medal which says engineer thinks of hitherto unattainable. Hitherto unattainable, right? So engineers make things happen, whether they build Eiffel Towers or whether they build skyscrapers which touch the sky, something that we are not conceived of, thought of. You have sort of done it. Don't forget the Empire State Building was done such a long time ago. So engineers were way ahead. Science is only 200 years old, whereas engineering is 30,000 years old. Right from the time somebody learned how to harness the power of the wind, from that time the engineering started, whereas science, modern science is very recent. So these are the characteristics of an engineer. And in all this what he has done, it has been project-based learning. In a sense, he says, I have to move from here to there, and how do I do that? I chair what is called the National Innovation Foundation. Now, they deal with grassroots innovators. And I'll tell you about this learning by doing. There's an old man, Saifuddin, in his late 70s, early 80s. And he had this flood. He saw the flood and he had to reach the other side of the bank of the river. And he said, no, I can't take no for an answer. And then he created a bicycle which can float on water and he could sort of ride. You know, there's a beautiful film on this. To me, he became a part of a solution, not of a part of a problem. The problem was the flood, so you can't go. The solution was, though, I don't care, there is a flood, but I have to go. And then so that is the characteristics, I would say, of an engineer. All right. So project-based learning to me is fundamental because it seeks to find solutions by picking up knowledge from all areas, not necessarily. An electrical engineer should not just think of solving his own problem by just looking at electrical engineering. He can get a solution from anywhere, from any other branch of engineering or science.
And That's very interesting, because now we are touching on a topic of multidisciplinarity, and what in your opinion it is, and how do you see it being integrated into the engineering discipline or education?
I think that's a very important question. That is something very close to my heart. In fact, almost 16 years ago in London, I gave the Danckwerts Memorial Lecture. Danckwerts was kind of a father of chemical engineering. And in his name there is this lecture. And the title of my lecture itself was Borderless Chemical Engineering Science, the Emerging Paradigm. And I talked about breaking borders between different disciplines, including between engineering and science, like engineering and physics, engineering and chemistry, engineering and biology. How do we break these borders? That is multidisciplinarity. Let me give an example. How do we use knowledge from different fields, and particularly that cuts across disciplines? Take mixing, for instance. You know, we have been always told how to do mixing by take a stirrer like a turbine or a paddle, put it in a tank and stir it, right? But then in physics, there are advances on what is called as a chaotic advection, and those principles were used by someone to develop a better mixer. Because when we say mixer, we always say rotate it at 500 revolutions per minute or 1000 revolutions per minute. He said, don't do that. Go from 10 to 500 and come back from 500 to 10 and so on. And there is a basic physics behind it that had come through the theories that were developed in chaotic advection in physics, and he blended the two. So this is a beautiful example of how interface between physics and engineering was used to do something that an engineer does commonly better. In the same way, one of the things that bothers me enormously is that we actually divide those guys who do mathematics, physics, etc. on one hand, and biology on the other hand. Okay? And I think that is utterly wrong. Because if you look at biology, you will find nature has been doing what you might like to call as a natural engineering for millions of years. And there is so much that we can learn. Like,
Bionics,
for example,
yes,
exactly. For example, I'm speaking to you, and I'm using my mouth for speaking. But maybe at around 1 o'clock, I will have my lunch, and I will use it for something else. So the way...
Multimodality.
Yes, and multifunctionality is something that engineers need to learn, and there is no better way of doing that in biology.
As well as your animal life and...
Yes. I mean, I was just looking at something in the morning, and I picked up, and I'll just read it out to you. It is your ear. Okay? And it says, to Helmholtz, ear was the heart of a system of resonators allowing the analysis of complex sounds. Later on, it became a telephone with a auditory nerve as a cable. It was also a frequency analyzer hidden in the brain. More recently, it has been found to embody many other novelties, such as impedance matching, frequency analysis, and automatic gain control. Can you imagine that? In the same way, brain initially was considered as a telephone exchange, later on as an electronic computer, and recently as a holographic data storing system. What you learn from biology, therefore, is this multifunctionality, how to use the same parts, because nature is extremely economic. It doesn't waste anything, you know. Now, I'm beginning to see that there is a new word that is cropping up. It is called frugal engineering. Getting more from less is a part of frugal engineering. How I use very small amount of resource, whether it is physical, whether it is capital, whether it is financial, to build something, okay? When you read the book, A Small Wonder Making of Nano, the Tata car, you'll find multitude of examples on how, because there was a price performance envelope which they could not exceed, because the price could not exceed 1 lakh. They created a car within 1 lakh, and therefore many of the components they have used in the car, actually they have more than one functions. In fact, you would have noticed that it has only one wiper and it does the jobs of 2 wipers. All right? I believe this basic principle of frugal engineering, which comes from biology. You cannot learn until there is an interface that you create between engineering and biology. Secondly, the human body itself, you will see, basically we used to succumb to diseases, no more so. Now we talk about regenerative medicine.
Yes.
See, we are moved from, we are moved from curative medicine to predictive medicine to regenerative medicine. Now several parts of the body will get engineered, re-engineered, recreated by regenerative medicine. Now that requires engineering, and that's why you see the words that didn't exist before. Like you hear the word tissue engineering, you hear the word metabolic engineering. All right, that is very closely linked. So by giving these two examples from the world of physics as well as biology, I'm emphasizing the point as to how important multidisciplinarity is.
Could you give a live example of, let's say, information communication technology as a discipline and biology or life sciences merging together to develop products which are...
Oh, sure. I mean, bioinformatics is a great example, where what you are doing is that all the knowledge that is in the open domain now, thanks to projects like Human Genome Science, you are actually making use of them, using vast computational power to actually let's say design new drugs or create predictive medicines and so on. I remember when I was the Director General of CSIR, I found that the best software in bioinformatics was Accelerus for about $500,000, and I said, this my small biotech companies can't afford. So I went to TCS, who did not have any feeling about life science, and I said, look, let us develop a software which will be 10 times cheaper but 10 times better. And Dr. Vidyasagar took up the challenge. Now, he had 80 to 90 engineers who did not know biology. And I put together 19 laboratories who knew biology but did not know sort of computation. Together they formed a team. We just spent something like $5 million, and they created what is called as BioSuit, which are 10 times cheaper and 10 times better. All right. So here is a live example of what India can do in this particular field. Now, this has become a terrific platform now, you know, which is being used all over for a variety of purposes.
That brings me to another of those very important components in which India needs today desperately, and that is innovation. And we are missing that still, in terms of how we train our engineers or how we train our students. So can you please talk about the importance of design, research and innovation and in terms of our education?
Excellent question. In fact, design, research and innovation have to go together in order that we make a success in terms of living up to the real meaning of the word innovation. What is innovation? Let's get the fundamentals right. Innovation is a successful exploitation of a new idea. I repeat, successful exploitation of a new idea. First, new idea. New idea means it could be new to India or new to the world. It doesn't matter. For example, when we were doing drug development, when we were only allowing process patterns but not product patterns, we were allowed to copy the molecules that the rest of the world had developed. We did that, and that is how we built our generic industry. That is how we had cheap drugs. Okay, so those molecules were new to India, but they were not new to the world. They were discovered already, right? So innovation there comprised work in process chemistry and process engineering, because the biology was already done by them. Now when you have to do a new molecule ourselves, we have to do chemistry, engineering as well as biology ourselves. We have to subject it to human trials like they were not subjected before, because we used a tried and tested drug and sort of did that, right? So that is the meaning of new idea. The second is exploitation. Exploitation is not in a bad way. Exploitation means that you are actually using it in the field. Finally,
in the context.
It is not just set up in the laboratory where you come and demonstrate to a visitor, this is what I've done. No, that's not the idea. Yeah, the product has to be in the hands of the customer. And finally, the word is successful. When is innovation considered successful? When you do it with speed, because you have to be ahead of your competitor, otherwise you will lose out. Then also scale, because if you just do it for few customers, it's of no use, cannot make an impact, right? Scale and sustainability, you know, where left on its own, it will create, it will sustain as a business, not with government props and tax support and subsidies and so on and so forth. No, that doesn't work. So that is the definition of an innovation. Now, in order that we move from mind to marketplace, or a concept to commercialization, that's a long chain, okay? And in that long chain, several things play a role. Research plays a role because you have to work to find out, you have to find out how can you create a product that can finally work in the field. Then having done that, it is not anything that will work unless there is something that the customer likes. He finds it convenient, whether it is an iPad, whether it is an iPhone, whether it is something else. He will not accept it, right? That means design. And design plays an extremely critical role. We isolate design today. That is not correct. It has to be integrated. Then there's a development. And in that development, we do a prototype, for example, beta test it, so that we get user feedback. For example, you might create a mobile phone and give it to a farmer. But the farmer has sweaty hands and it falls. That is not good enough. So obviously, he needs to hold it properly. So therefore, the surface that you use here might be very different from that in Europe or US, for example. Okay? So all this understanding you get
user information has to be integrated.
Has to be integrated in order to conceptualization. So you do that, and then finally there's a deployment. Okay? So in this entire process, I believe we find different elements of innovation. Now, there are 3 or 4 fundamentals in innovation that we must understand. The first is innovation can be incremental, innovation can be disruptive. Incremental innovation will give you only 5 or 10% change. Disruptive innovation will give you a factor of 10, 100. Okay? So when you moved, when I started this New Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative program, the personal computer at that time, desktop personal computer, was around 70 to 80,000 rupees. And I said, can you do it in 10,000? This was in year 2000, by the way. And Vinay Deshpande came and did it, actually, and that is now the DSK Mobilis. So from $2,000, we brought the cost down to $200, 10 times, not 10%, 10 times. But now, Akash has come. Now, Akash is a tablet, computer tablet, which they are trying to pitch at $35 to $45. Now, whether it will be successful or not, the jury is still out. That's a different matter. It is still being tested. But you can just imagine if it is successful, you will be talking about something like $50, let us say. So from 2,000 to 200 to 50, that's a 40-fold change. That is disruptive. What India needs is a disruptive innovation. All right? Like Nano, a $2,000 car, as against the $20,000 that started with. Okay? Similarly, Arvind Eye Care doing cataract surgery, not for $3,000 but $30, and doing it better than Royal College of Ophthalmic Surgeons, getting more from less, not less from less. That is innovation. It's a workflow innovation. Similarly, business process innovation. Don't forget that in the year 2000 we had just 5 million mobiles. Today we have 800 million plus mobiles, and they are in the hands of not you and me. They are in the hands of a rickshaw puller and a farmer, a common man. $25 handset. 1 cent per minute is the charge for the phone call, as against 8 cents per minute in the US. Okay. And that is transforming India. Now, if you deep dive into it, what did Airtel do? Or, for example, when Dhirubhai Ambani came and made that famous announcement in year 2000, phone call at the cost of a postcard. He took the industry by storm, but they made it possible. In fact, Reliance used what is called as a refinery model for telecommunications, not cost per subscriber, but cost per Erlang being the volume of traffic of voice that flows per unit time. And they drew parallel with barrels per day that they were familiar with in terms of the petroleum refining they were doing. So an engineer has to think ingeniously about bringing these disruptive innovations which can make a societal change. I think that is a great key for the Indian engineer. The second part of the innovation has to do with what Mahatma Gandhi had said. He had said that there is enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Yeah. Now, what he meant by that is use your resources, particularly which cannot be renewed, very carefully. Because what we have been given by our forefathers, we must keep for our grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren, right? So, innovation today has to necessarily focus on getting more from less for more and more people, not only the current but also the future, not just making more and more profit. What it also means is that innovation today has to try to balance people on one hand so that the benefits reach the maximum number of people, planet on the second hand so that we preserve the planet, preserve the resources. Yes, and of course make a profit, because otherwise enterprises will not work. So it is people, planet and profit towards which innovation has to be driven. Yeah. And the last part is Indian engineers in particular, they have a challenge about Indian innovation in India for Indian problems which require Indian solutions. All right? Which are very peculiarly Indian. Okay? For example, where else in the world will you start designing systems which have to withstand dust, which have to withstand humidity, which have to withstand
low bandwidth connectivity,
no electricity, and so on and so forth. All right? So you have to start creating products, design them in a way which with all these handicaps you will still be able to run. Okay? Just to give an example, large number of our villages don't have electricity. They don't have light at home at night. Their children can't study, right? When will that electricity come? It's going to take years with the way things are going. So one good quality of young people is impatience. They're impatient. They don't want to wait for the government. They said, we'll take it in our hand, we'll do it. One such person is Ashish Gavade. And he just here in Pabal village, about 30 kilometers from here. Yeah. He was working for Ford Motors. He was their best expert on hybrid cars. And one day he said, no, I don't want to work for a multinational company. I want to work for my India. I want to return to India and do something good for India. And what good do I do? I'll help the villages. And how do I help the villages? I'll make sure that the children in the village have the ability to read at night in a decent light. And therefore, because he didn't want to go with those kerosene lamps and this, that and the other. So what did he create? He created a pedal-driven generator which actually uses a light-emitting diode, and 4 minutes of pedaling gives you 4 hours of light. 4 minutes of pedaling giving you 4 hours of light. And you can see a light as bright as this in a hut just by somebody having pedaled away. Now, this is not what is needed in US or Europe, but this is what is needed here. Because before that grid comes, that we are talking about, it will take years, basically. You see? So Indian engineers have to do this, what I like to call as innovation. Indian innovation.
Yeah, that's a nice term.
Yeah. So I would say these are 3 or 4 challenges that we have in innovation.
So, in a nutshell, what we are saying is that design, innovation, and research is an essential ingredient of engineering education today.